Okay, so uh, this is Organizing Your Files and Photos, presented by the Downers Grove Public Library. My name is Andrew. I'm going to be giving this class today, and I'm excited to have you all with me. I said before the enthusiasm for this class was really exciting. So um, thank you all for coming. Now, before I get into this, I would like to ask if we could hold questions for the end. The breadth of this topic is pretty incredible, and people will be approaching uh, this file organizing project from a lot of different vantage points and with different goals. So I'd like to try to avoid getting bogged down in individual questions until we cover all the content that I have written. We will get there though eventually. I guess feel free to drop questions in the chat if you need to make a note, but I won't be addressing them until the end. So just want to mention that. Then I'm going to share my slides here. Okay, so you all should be able to see my slideshow. Oops. Okay, so organizing your files and photos. I like to start with a fun fact. Today, a recent survey found that the average American owns 10 connected computers, tablets, and phones, various devices. Uh, Obviously, a huge number of personal digital devices. Each of them could be creating and sharing their own digital content. You know, you have a phone you take pictures on, a computer you make documents on, maybe two or three computers even. With so many devices and so many options for cloud storage, finding your cherished photos and important documents on an as-need basis can be uh, very difficult. And with the way that things are going, more and more devices using the internet, more of your work life, more photos that are born digital. We'll get to that in a minute. Um, this is not changing anytime soon. If anything, it'll become more complex to organize all your digital content as time goes on. So that means that there's never been a better time than now to get started on uh, organizing it, to take charge and try to set up a system that works for all your digital content. And today we're going to be discussing some strategies that digital archivists do use professionally to organize an incredible amount of content. And I will, give you a caution that this can be a difficult process. Just approach it with a spirit of patience and planning, and get some steady work done on it, and you can absolutely accomplish this. So I'd like to cover our objectives. They are, again, a little general because so many people are approaching this from different angles. First, to give you all the resources to plot out your file organization project. Second, to help you understand the process of organizing your digital files. And third, to give you the confidence you need to undertake this project. So with that out of the way, I want to go over some key terms and concepts. Some of it might sound a little jargony, but I think it's useful to give you some of the vocabulary that archivists would use to discuss this project. being able to describe this process can really help you think through it. And I think that being able to talk like an archivist could help give you the confidence of one. So, very first thing, preservation. When you think of that word, you're probably thinking of the lengths that we go to preserve important physical documents. I've got a picture of the Declaration of Independence here in an oxygen-free environment under bulletproof glass under guard at the National Archives. You might also think of spontaneously preserved fossils, like got the mosquito and amber from Jurassic Park. And you might think that preservation is something more suited to the physical world, that things that you have digitally are invulnerable to that kind of decay, since they're in a drive or in a cloud or wherever. You don't often have to think about where they're stored or how. But of course, digital files aren't invulnerable. They can be corrupted, or the drives they're stored on damaged or demagnetized. For individual files, the software necessary to open them at some point can become obsolete and no longer supported. That doesn't happen too often, but we do have backwards compatibility built into a lot of software. But say you have a document you created on the 80s text processor WordStar, from some old computer back in the day. If you had transferred that in stages, every 3 to 5 years you get a new computer, a new operating system. If you had transferred that every so often incrementally up to a Windows 10 Word document file, then you might be set. But if you have a WordStar file from an old drive that you want to move to your computer today, that might be a lot more challenging. So it goes to show that even with efforts towards backwards compatibility in software and also in hardware, there can still be issues with accessing it. Okay, so preservation, something that is not limited to physical media. Ingesting. So just as this would suggest, it's your collection sort of eating the document. It's the process of adding the document to your collection. So this is sometimes accomplished without you being consciously aware of it. When you take a photo on your phone, that's sort of ingesting it to the phone's memory. And sometimes, you have a cloud setup, like the iCloud for your iPhone. It could even be added to your cloud without you being fully aware. Sometimes ingesting a document means digitizing it. So what is digitizing? And we see here a photo of an archivist scanning an old newspaper or magazine page. This is how physical media is made digital. Sometimes that's with the goal of being able to discard the physical copy. Digital files, you can have a small hard drive with years of newspapers, and they don't have to take up boxes of space in a garage or something. On the converse to that, you've got documents that were originally created on a computer. Those are referred to as born digital. And that's in contrast to physical documents that were digitized at one point. Born digital documents are neat because they have metadata sort of built into them. And that contains useful information like the date and location they were created, perhaps the user that created them, details like that. Um, and all things being equal, if you have a born digital document, um, try to preserve that when possible. It's way better than like a scanned physical copy. The metadata is a lot more useful. Um, I'm also going to add, for your own personal project, just to pull this back into focus, if you have any printed photos or documents that you're considering digitizing, like say you have a flatbed scanner, you want to get those onto your computer and include those in your preserved digital content, I would recommend waiting on that until you're done organizing your existing digital files. Right now, creating a bunch of digital files without any place to store them would be sort of counterproductive. That's definitely an undertaking that you can work on at some point. And if you already feel pretty comfortable with your storage, then go right ahead. But that can be, a significant task in its own right. I just don't want, you know, you don't need the extra complication. That's what I'm trying to say at this stage. Okay, so next we have preservation schedule. So this is another thing, and preservation schedule, I'll say, uh, is the length that you intend to have your documents preserved. Sounds pretty simple. It's something a lot of people overlook. Uh, when a lot of people are considering uh, preserving something, they don't really think for how long. Um, and I know that can that can be kind of an existential question, to answer it concretely, and a difficult, sometimes painful question. Um, the truth is that forever is not a length of time. Um, you should be thoughtful of, to some degree, how long you'd like your content to be preserved. Um, and you don't need to get too far into the weeds on that. I have here an example. We've got an album of family vacation photos from 2019, and then another album or folder of tax documents from 2011. This should be pretty simple. Obviously we're planning on keeping the family photos for the long haul. 10-year-old tax documents probably don't need anymore. I think the IRS, last time I checked, the IRS suggests that you keep the last 5 years of tax documentation. Too much beyond that becomes sort of superfluous. Like, when are you going to need, tax documents from a decade ago? When have you ever needed those? And that's maybe an easy example, but you probably have files on your computer right now that if you took a hard look at them, you wouldn't want to keep, or you think you could part with. So if that just means setting a higher priority to photos and a lower priority to, old work documents, cover letters, um, budget and tax information, things like that, then that's one way to approach preservation schedule. Again, you don't need to be considering, exactly how many years you plan for your digital archive to endure. but if there's any way you can give some sense of priority, that's helpful. Okay, so we're moving on from the jargon. We're going to get into the actual stages of this project of preserving your digital content. So the very first step is assessment. This also might sound like a no-brainer, but before we really get into the hard work of detangling your files and organizing them, it's really important to determine what you need to do. So you can start by making a list of any devices that you may have content on. This is a good way to get started. The first category would be devices that you use, that you might use on a daily or weekly basis currently. Your phone, if you have an iPad or tablet, if you have a personal computer or a laptop, any of these could be good candidates for that list. The second would be the cloud. Not everybody consciously has documents in the cloud, so this might be a little bit more difficult to suss out. You might also have documents that you don't want to, from the cloud, that you don't want to include. For example, if you use Google Drive for work, that might not be content that you want to add to your own personal digital archive. But, you know, any of these services, iCloud, Google Drive, Google Photos, Dropbox, those are all cloud services, and you might have content in there that you might want to include, so that makes the list. Okay, so, oh, and I also want to add on iCloud, iPhone users might inadvertently greenlight their phone to store some content in their iCloud account. I believe you get an iCloud account associated with your Apple ID. And that's, you know, nothing nefarious. Apple has kind of made a shift towards the cloud. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But Apple has been expanding the role of the cloud with their iPhones. The reason being, the more things you can store in the cloud, the more space you have on your phone. More space you have, in particular, for apps and you know, downloaded podcasts and things that wouldn't make as much sense to add to the cloud. So one other little note, if you don't think you use the cloud and you have an Apple device, you know, an iMac or an iPhone, iPad, it's possibly worth investigating if your device is set up with iCloud. Okay, and then the last list, I have this in orange because it's not, again, not a high priority, what I call deprecated storage. So these are the devices that could be, you know, old computers or laptops, hard drives that have been taken out of a computer, old phones. If you've been using computers for a long time, this could include legacy media like floppy disks, could include CD-ROMs. I would handle this category of documents with care. Again, this is probably something you'll want to tackle later. Don't get bogged down in unearthing, you know, boxes of CDs and trying to copy the files, you know, from them onto your computer. Unless you know that you have significant, you know, files or photos on those disks, I just wouldn't bother with them at this stage. Um, Another point, as far as making a list goes, if you feel computer savvy, you can try using file counting software. There's programs like Tree Size. This up here is the Tree Size logo. Um, and again, that's TREESIZE. That is free software you can download, and it can be used to count the number of files in your various drives and folders on your computer. So it's not going to cover everything, but if you have a PC or a laptop is a major part of your uh, digital life, um, you might consider downloading that just to give you a better sense of what's on there and how much. Um, so again, this is all for making a list. Next up, we're going to be planning how this is going to take shape. Now that we've assessed what content we have that we'd like to group together and preserve, I have some keys for ideal organization. First is that it's stored together. Ideally, you have everything stored together as much as possible that you'd like to preserve. This could include various devices or drives. For example, maybe you want to have some on a hard drive and some in the cloud. That can be ideal for better accessibility. Your documents in the cloud could be accessed from a phone, for example, or from somewhere else, not within your house. That can be really useful. It does come at the cost of simplicity. So if you're willing to kind of break up your content into different areas, that can make perfect sense. And again, some people find that maybe they like the way that Google Photos stores all their photos, and you can use it to view a slideshow. Maybe you use Google Photos for all your photos, and then you have other documents on a drive or using some other cloud storage. So that's another approach. Next, I suggest making a storage tree. So if you start with a few broad categories, say, music files, photos, written documents, start with that. Just think through the types of files you have and group them together accordingly. And from those few very general categories, you can kind of branch them out into more specific as you go. And if you're on a PC, you just start by, you could do this from your desktop even. Make a folder that'll be My Digital Archive. Within that folder, make, 3 other folders, whatever you want to name them. If you want to follow my example and do music, music, photos, written documents, something like that. Within each of those folders, make more folders. Photos could branch into actual photos and then digital art or something like that. Really depends on your need. Or photos could branch into, family photos, photos with friends. Or it could branch into decades, like you have photos for the 90s, the 2000s, the teens, different ways to categorize them, and it's going to depend on what your content looks like. But the point is to start broad, get more specific as you work down through the tree, and then you can stop when every file or photo that you would put in that lowest level storage fits well with everything else. If I get to a point where, okay, these are all my photos from 2018, but some of them are from concerts I went to, and some of them are family gatherings, maybe I want to keep going. Um, keep adding other categories within those. So the tree is a great structure, and it can help you just from the folder perspective, just get a good start. So next, consistent naming. So when you're naming your folders or your files, try to be consistent, be specific with them. One other goal is so that someone else looking at this this organizational structure could understand where to find something. You never know how and when that might come useful. So it's ideal that someone besides you would be able to look at your folders and be able to browse for a particular photo album. And then naming, also make it clear at the folder level. Sometimes, especially if you had a digital camera, this is mostly for photos created before smartphones were ubiquitous. So you had a digital camera, you uploaded a lot of photos. You might find them in a folder uploaded under names like DC0001, DC0002, DC0003, and so on. I wouldn't stress about renaming each photo. Having a list of photos, it doesn't matter if the names are totally unintelligible if they're in some kind of order. The names are okay at the file level as long as the folder is sensibly named. So you might have those DC 1 through 87, but then if the folder is called something like Grand Canyon Trip 2009, then it's pretty clear what's in that file, what's in that folder. And then my last tip for the planning stage is grouping like with like. So if you keep media in related formats together, it means that you never have to think you're going through a photo album, or say like, a holiday album or something. Did I put that letter my kid wrote to Santa in this folder? That's not part of the equation. Because you know that holiday, 2017 is only going to include photos. So you can find that letter in some other folder. Sometimes, it's not always a totally clean solution. It does come down to a judgment call at times. So for example, you're uploading files from your phone. You're doing photos. Maybe there are some videos in there, or some photos. On the iPhone, if you take a live photo, that gets saved as a video. You want to include those with photos. But if you have something that's saved to a video file, like I don't know, like a YouTube video or something like that, that you might not want to include with photos. That might be included with other digital movie files, maybe. Grouping like with like can also help inform what your top level folder categories should be. So if you're finding you have a lot of what's a really specific file type? If you find that you have a lot of WAV, voice recording files from your phone, for example. You might decide, okay, so these don't really belong in the music file. Maybe I make a fourth file at my very topmost level, a fourth folder for voice recordings, something like that. Okay, and now for the actual work of organizing, this is the difficult thing. Gathering and organizing your files can take some time, and again, it's going to vary pretty significantly based on the number of devices you have and the number of drives you plan to consolidate, whether or not the cloud is going to play a role, and also in what type of backup system you want to use. So yeah, the cloud, are you consolidating anything from the cloud? You want to copy it from the cloud to another drive or another cloud? Are you going to be bifurcating any of your storage to have some on a drive and some in the cloud? That's going to change how you'll approach this. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give a lot of specific examples of how to accomplish this. Because the answers can be so different. Hopefully, towards the end, when we get into our question segment, we can try to deal with some specifics. But I want to start with various storage options. So, at this stage, you're organizing your files. You have them grouped together. You need to figure out where they're going to be stored. That's another key consideration. So we'll start with the personal computer. I'm going to assume this means a desktop computer rather than a laptop. Laptops, of course, have a shorter lifespan. They're not really upgradable, so you can't really improve the graphics card, the memory as they go on. A laptop, if you were going to store everything there, I would recommend finding a different option because those are most vulnerable. But let's talk about a desktop computer because this is a solution that a lot of people reach for. And why not? I mean, it's by definition, if you already have a computer, you already have the storage. What's easier and cheaper than that? Unfortunately, a personal computer, if you're not getting any additional accessories for it, you won't have any option for backup unless you also use the cloud. So the con is that everything is stored on that computer, and that makes it kind of vulnerable. If you were to get a virus or the computer was to become corrupted or otherwise inaccessible, then your files are in a tough spot. The other problem with this is that your files will only be accessible from this computer. Cloud storage solutions accepted, you're going to need to log into this computer to access any of those or make copies. So I mentioned this sort of just to dismiss it as an option. If you have all your files stored on your personal computer, it might be time to consider some alternate solution. And I want to present a few of those to you. The first is flash drives. This may surprise you a little bit if you've been using flash drives for years at this point. The truth is they have grown tremendously in storage space in recent years. You can now pretty inexpensively get flash drives around 50 gigabytes or more. And that's photos do take up some space, but that's a fairly sizable drive for being so small. One other advantage is that it's a physical media. Some people really like to have their media somewhat physical or feel like they're in greater control over it. than they would with a cloud storage system. Flash drives are also super portable. You just throw it in your pocket. You can take your files with you anywhere. You could put it on a keychain. Um, that portability is also kind of a vulnerability, though. Being able to carry it anywhere and have it with you at all times means that it's also just as vulnerable as carrying it with you and having it with you at all times means. Flash drives are pretty vulnerable to being demagnetized. This is a true story. I just got done moving and I unpacked one box that was all desk stuff, nothing crazy. But I had a flash drive that I found stuck to a magnet in the box, which was, I blame myself. I should have stored it a little bit better than that. But sure enough, I plugged in the flash drive. I probably didn't have anything important on it, but I plugged it in and it said it was corrupted and needed to be formatted, which means I had to erase everything that was on it. Again, no big loss in that particular case, but it's very easy to do. A lot of small devices have magnets in them. And it's very possible that if you have it in your pocket or on your keys, it can be, damaged. And of course, they're just small and easy to misplace. Why do I mention flash drives after that long story about how how they've betrayed me? They can be kind of a neat way to cordon off your different data. So if it's useful at all to you to have a flash drive with movies on it be different from your flash drive with family photos, then that's maybe something you could consider. You could also assemble a number of flash drives and have them on a key ring or something like that. That's an option. So next is the cloud. And the advantages of the cloud are that there's no hardware cost, so it's very easy to set up. You just create an account. Again, there are a number of cloud storage services that start free, that you can pay for just as much space as you're, as you may need or are willing to pay for. Google Drive, Google Photos, iCloud, Dropbox, these are all services that you probably use already to some degree. And of course, you can pay for as much storage as you'd like. For now, that kind of comes with asterisks, because who knows if at some time in the future, digital storage space with the glut of content that's being created all the time, if that will be metered a little bit more carefully. Some archivists think so. And again, you do have to pay for that. It's a recurring cost because cloud services operate on a subscription basis. That makes it really difficult to predict how much it's going to cost you. And changing cloud services can be kind of tricky if you want to move all your stuff from the iCloud to Google Drive. That's not always a simple proposition. You need to have basically a third drive to download everything from iCloud onto and then to upload to Google Drive. The other cons of cloud storage are that it requires internet connection to access. The flip side of that is with stable internet connection, you can access your cloud documents from anywhere in the world. You don't need to be at your desk or on your home network. Anywhere you are and you have access to internet and some kind of device, you can access your documents. So depends. Some people really like cloud storage. I'm a little biased. My favorite option is the next one, and that is a network attached storage, or NAS for short. So NAS, it's basically a bank of hard drives that you keep separate from your computer, and you can access it by internet connection. It'll connect to your router, um, and that means any device on your home network would be able to tie into your NAS. So that means that multiple documents on your home network could access, or sorry, multiple devices on your home network can access your documents. It's also kind of the best of both worlds in terms of being physical storage space, so that you have more control over that than perhaps with a cloud. And it's also, you know, a physical medium that's fairly safe. You're not, you know, throwing this in your pocket or your purse. It's just staying in a safe spot in your house. That's also a con, you know, for some of the same reasons. Depends on your needs, though. And another pro is that it's a one-time purchase. Cons are that the space is limited. We're talking hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes. So it's for most consumers, the typical user, it's going to be enough to get one of these units. But space is theoretically limited. And another con is that they do require a fairly high and consistent internet speed to use. They do suck up some of the bandwidth that you'll be using. So if you don't have strong or consistent internet access, then this might not be the greatest option for you. I like them because you know, you still have pretty strong accessibility to your documents, and you can rest assured that they're very safe on a very regularly backed up and secure set of drives that you leave at your house. So those are a few options. We covered your computer and why that shouldn't be your only option for storage, flash drives, the cloud, NAS. All of these are options that you might use, perhaps even a combination of for your storage. Remember, it is ideal to have fewer locations for your documents. But you might even use both an NAS and you know, the cloud for or an NAS and your computer, some combination of these to be able to have redundancy in your documents, to have some duplicates in case something goes wrong with one of them. Next, I want to cover some tips for organizing. These are just very, you know, general tips. First is don't delete anything until you're certain it's been copied to a second location. This is also really important for any iCloud users. In recent years, Apple, I mentioned they've changed their service model a little bit to sort of push users a little bit towards the cloud, iCloud. Um, One thing that they've started doing is if you're set up with iCloud, your photos will display basically just as a thumbnail on your phone itself. And when you try to open it on your phone, it calls up the actual file that's stored in the iCloud. So if you go into the iCloud and you think, oh, I can delete these, I have a copy on my phone, that means you're deleting the original. So don't do that. Make sure that you have the file, the photo, in some second location that is separate and secure before you delete any copy of it from another device. So let's see. Next tip, use the details layout. If you're on, this is a screen grab from a Windows 10 computer in the Documents browser. Go to the View tab, find View, and then click Details for the layout. Some people like the icon view, maybe extra large icons if you know you need to be able to see them easier. Detail view really can't be beat as far as the information that comes up and how easy it is to organize a folder. Details is going to show you the name of the file, when it was last modified. You'll be able to see the user that created it, the size of the file, lots of important things. There's also the icon, so you can see what the file type is based on icon, if that's helpful. There's a lot of reasons that details is a good way to view your files when you're organizing. If you click the name or date modified drop downs down there, you'll be able to see or to sort all the files in that list based on the name, when it was modified, whatever you want. That's also really helpful, the size of the file. As another tip, you can also use the preview pane. That can be useful for photos sometimes to be able to see a larger thumbnail of it. If you're finding that that's slowing down your computer, having to load a bunch of thumbnails, previews, you could switch that off. Either way, whatever works best for you. Okay, and so then the last stage of this process is maintenance. So once you get your files in order, that is cause to celebrate, but you can't get complacent because maintaining your digital storage is kind of a continuous process. As you use your computer, your phone, other devices, you'll be creating new documents, taking new pictures. Every so often, I would recommend uploading things from your phone or from your computer, getting them organized into the right folder. Also when you get a new device, like a new phone, make sure that your photos and documents from that phone are carried over to the next, or at least uploaded to a computer so that you have all those files to access from there or to sync onto another phone. And same goes with a computer. When you get a new computer, don't just stop using the old one cold turkey and move on to the new one. Make sure that you bring any important folders and your storage schema forward to the next computer. So general tips, just make sure that you stay storage and organization minded even once you complete this process. So now at this stage, I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I want to address some questions, starting with those in the chat. So Laura says, regarding tax forms, is it critical to save 8606s forever, especially if you plan to convert? Don't know the answer to that. I would say if it's something that could have a bearing on your future financial state, hang on to it. But if it's something like a tax return from years ago, or you know, like think of all the other documents that you gather when you do taxes. You've got you know, like old
The
W-2s.
answer.
The answer?
Laura Brusen knows the answer. So if you want to unmute her.
Okay. Let's see. Let me find it.
I'm just gonna say I'm going through. I'm 64 years old. I'm retired, and I'm going through hell because I tossed everything that not only tax advisors but personal organizers said, "Hey, you don't need them. You don't need them." What an 8606 is if you ever make any, to keep it short, if you ever put any money in an IRA, it tells you your tax basis. And so what happens is when years later you decide that you want to convert those funds to a Roth, you have to pay taxes. Now, the 8606 could save you tens of thousands of dollars. But if you don't have them, then you either have to gather them or just say, oh, I don't have them. So it's something that very few people think about. And it's just a simple one pager. And yeah, there's a lot of tax records that you can't toss, but that is one that I would highly recommend that you don't. So.
Okay. Yeah, great contribution. Thanks, Laura. Um, yeah, you know, of course, some documents, use your judgment. If it's something that could have any bearing, you know, save it. Okay. Let's see. Dan says by network attached storage, I suspect that is also referred to as an external hard drive backup. Yeah, pretty similar. NAS is a bit, it's multiple drives, so it's got built-in redundancy even within that one unit. If all you have is an external hard drive that you know plug in by USB and schedule a regular backup, then I think that's you know that works too. That's also the kind of device that you could you know carry with you if you ever needed. So yeah, thanks for that, Dan. NAS is a more comprehensive, you know, single unit, but external hard drives are good too. Mary Kay says, what software would you recommend we use to pull up the photos, also to edit photos? Editing photos, that's another wrinkle. If you have photos you need to crop or color correct, I recommend GIMP. We actually have another class on GIMP that I taught. That's GIMP. We could probably send that out too.
We have the link. I'll send out the link to it.
Okay, great.
And also I'll send also out the student guide.
Okay.
Okay.
As far as software for viewing photos, you don't really need software. Windows 10, if you're on Windows 10, has a photo viewer built into it. So I wouldn't worry so much about photo viewing. And then again, GIMP for photo editing would be my recommendation. Pam says, is there a way to know which files have already been backed up? Not off the top of my head. That's part of why having a good organizational structure is so important. That you will be able to know based on your knowledge of your drives, you know, what you have backed up or not. But ideally, it shouldn't be like some things are backed up, some aren't. If you have it all in one place, it should be it's all or nothing really. Okay, so Betty Ann says, when I delete a photo from my desktop or phone, does it get deleted from the cloud or vice versa? How would I know which is the master? There's nothing in the file's metadata that really tells you it's the master file. And as far as deleting from, your phone or the cloud, usually desktop computers and laptops don't have the same relationship with the cloud, but I know, phones that, like the iPhone, integrates with the iCloud. That does have more of a continuous relationship of syncing. So if something's deleted from one, it could impact copies on the other, or again, fragments of that same photo or file on the other device. I would say just make sure that you have it someplace secure, which wouldn't be a phone. A phone is not a great place to permanently store a file. Farhan says, how about an SSD not attached to PC to store data? Yeah, and I think I mentioned this earlier, kind of.
Are required for all patrons in the kids' room. For those who have not been vaccinated.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier with the external drive. SSDs, for those who don't know, that's a solid state drive. They tend to be a lot faster than your typical optical drives, or sorry, optical. Magnetic drives, and that would be another great place to have as an external storage drive. Laura asks, when backing up a device to a hard drive, how to avoid duplicates. You can't always, and that's the tough thing. To a degree, you could just accept that there might be duplicates. Depends on how, yeah, it really depends how many places you might have copied your folders or your directories over time and how annoying that might be, how many duplicates you might find. But a program like TreeSize might be able to tell you something like that. Put in another plug for that. Laura says, years ago I used a floppy, thicker than a floppy, not sure what it's called. I have two of these. How to transfer, the first thing is to be able to tell what they are. So yeah, if you're not sure, try to find some resource, try to Google, a serial number or, some kind of product name on there or manufacturer name. And then that'll get you started on finding some resource for uploading it. Okay, and then Dan says, so network attached storage is like the cloud. It's like the cloud in that it connects to your computer by internet. It's unlike the cloud in that it backs up to a physical device. The cloud works the same way. It's just that that physical device is on a server farm in Colorado or something, and you don't, own it. So if that helps. Patricia says, isn't NAS compatible with a Chromebook? It might depend on the NAS in question. I think it should be. I mean, all of these devices, any device that's capable of accessing your local network, like a Chromebook will, should be compatible with an NAS. The question is, do you want to have, I know a lot of people don't store a ton of content on their Chromebook. Oh, I mean, the cool thing about network attached storage is that you can use that as sort of a drive when you browse in your computer and find a file and open it. Your NAS, if you're connected to it, will be one of those drives you can open from. So even if you're not just using that as a backup, you can also use a Chromebook or some other device that can connect to it and, you know, sort of view from that device. Okay, so Dan's asking, having difficulty with the NAS, how it's different from the cloud or an external hard drive. So an NAS, and how do you get it? Okay, it's a unit that you can get at most, you know, electronics retailers. It's sort of like, whereas an external hard drive would be one additional hard drive that you'd connect by USB, usually USB cable to your computer, and be able to schedule backups to it and use that for storage, be able to pull up files that are stored there. And NAS is pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is it's larger. It's, you know, so instead of having the equivalent of one extra computer hard drive of storage, you might have like the equivalent of 5. So that's one aspect of it. The other is that it's connected to your computer not by a cable, but through your home Wi-Fi network. So it just connects to your router, and then any device that's in the home can pull up that NAS and everything that's stored on it. And there's, you know, some differences, like you can set up a password for that if you want on some devices. But hope that kind of helps elucidate it. Yes, exactly. It's a networked piece of hardware to help back up all your devices. So that, yeah, I mean, that's another part of the benefit of it. It's, you know, you can back up everything to one unit from, you know, multiple devices or computers. Okay, and then Mary Kay says, do you know of a good software program to manage your photos? I personally haven't found one that I really like yet. I've been just sort of using Windows, just have folders of photos, and I can open them and view, you know, the preview. It's been okay for, you know, getting copies made or, you know, sending them to print, things like that. But yeah, so I personally don't have a great answer for that. All right, and then on that note, I think we're going to end here. That's all the questions in chat. Yeah, agreed. Preview's not great for a slideshow. Yeah, don't have a terrific alternative though. But again, that kind of speaks to my needs. I don't have a ton of photos or a ton of photos that I you know, want organized into slideshows in the same way. Other people do. So, you know, that's just kind of a constant when you're talking about these things, like what are your needs? How do you need to meet those? What makes the most sense for you? All right, well, I will say before we end, if any other questions surface, feel free to email us at computerhelpdesk@dglibrary.org. I'm going to pop that in the chat. And if anything else comes up, I can try to address it. But otherwise, hopefully this gives you a good start, or can at least help get you over the conceptual barrier of figuring out how to approach this. I know people have years of photos and things that they want to consolidate and make more accessible for themselves and their families. And thank you all for being here today.